So, welcome everybody to Off the Books with Bethann and Samantha. And today we have Hannah Kaner. It's Kaner, right?
It is Hannah, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. We weren't sure about that. Awesome. We have her joining us today. She wrote the amazing novel that we were so lucky to receive an advanced proof of, Godkiller.
Which is stunning.
Stunning.
If you can't see.
The cover is stunning. So if
We
you guys
love
are
it.
just listening, turn on you got to go on YouTube, Facebook, or whatever, just so
Yeah.
you can see the cover.
Yes, it's a beautiful, I think it's a stag, right?
It is, yeah.
And then like framed in a moon. Oh man. And there's so many amazing editions out there now. So just go get your hands on one right this minute. Pause. Go get it.
Yes.
Come back.
This was such an amazing like fantasy, and I love that it wasn't like a ginormous like novel.
Oh yeah. It's pretty.
It's
Bite-sized fantasy.
it had
Yeah.
just enough description
Yes.
for it to not be too much, and I loved it. It was such a easy read, and 10 out of 10.
So before we go off and rant and rave about how amazing this book is,
Yes.
would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and the book Godkiller.
Well, hello. My name is Hannah Kaner, and I am a writer from the UK. I'm from Northumberland, which is like far in the northeast of the UK, just before Scotland. But now I live in Scotland, in Edinburgh, north of the wall, where I belong. And I mean, I've been writing for as long as I could hold fingers to a keyboard or pen to page. I can't really imagine my life without it. And I've been writing kind of like books and fantasy books. Like fantasy has always been my first love for a long time. But Godkiller is my debut book. And it's a fantasy novel about a woman who kills gods for a living until she finds a god that she cannot kill. And that is Skediketh, the god of white lies, who has somehow attached himself to a young noble girl who's on the run. And this girl and the god go on a quest to the lost city of gods, to try and beg a favor from like the last of the wild gods to try and separate them so the god killer can kill the god and save the girl. But on the way, they run into a knight errant who's on a secret quest of his own. ...
My favorite.
We need a sound effect.
I know we do need like one of those little keyboards with the cool sound effects on it.
The clapping.
But yes, if you guys so I feel like this is, I would say like an epic fantasy.
Mhm.
And it reminds me so much of like, I get Hobbit vibes from the journey and the beautiful like trail that they go on. And I love the Hobbit so much with all my heart. And
It's
it just really brought those amazing things out in it. And like I said, I was saying in our preview, our last episode, when I told everybody to pick this up before this interview, that this is such a good, because it's there's so much, but it's not so much. Does that make sense? It's like, I just got done reading Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings, and it's literally like this big. And I love
a
Brandon
lot of
Sanderson.
bang for your book. There's no shade in that. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
But
I
this is
love having a fantasy I can sink my teeth into. But with this one, I intentionally wanted to write something tight. And
Yes.
it's quite like a work with my editor and of myself to try and kind of like keep it tight to the kind of the story, and because it's so tempting in this world to sort of follow down different trails and expand upon the history or expand upon the potential future of the rest of the places. But I wanted to keep it focused on the sense of a quest. And you're absolutely like, the Hobbit and that kind of there and back again was the sort of the structure upon which I hung this book. And I really wanted to write a sort of a vein of classic fantasy, of the sense you have to get from A to B, the hero's journey, the Hobbit, Gawain and the Green Knight, like the sense of having to traverse a world that is dangerous and kind of full of magic and full of potential. And I really wanted to kind of start the story there with the very, very simple narrative thread that the rest of the books can then build on. So it was a really, it was a really kind of like a work of passion to try and get it contained into those 300 pages, I think it is, in the paperback.
How long did it
is
start?
so good.
Did you have to like chisel it down quite a bit?
No, it still started very short. I felt the story was completed around 90,000. So I did add stuff, but then I was kind of quite a rigorous self-editor. And then obviously my editor, who was like really brilliant, would kind of come in at certain passages where I was really just waxing lyrical about something I wanted to talk about. So I don't know, like the trade of spices in this world, or the kind of the minting of coins in this world. And she was like,
which would still be amazing.
maybe not quite relevant to the story here. Some people love a quest. Some people really hate the quest kind of like narrative. I love it. I love that kind of. I'm a walker myself. I love hiking in like the Scottish mountains, and so I really, really wanted to bring it out. And I have a deep, deep love of kind of Tolkien and like his previous works and like kind of that bedrock of fantasy. And I just really wanted to use it.
We think you did a fantastic. I think you did a phenomenal job, and I don't feel like I was missing out. I think you were able to pack in so much detail and so much, and the character development was phenomenal. And I loved being emotionally attached to all of these characters and the way that you care about them so deeply, and like it's just so beautifully. You did a fantastic. I love it. You did a fantastic job, and it just warms your heart in places. And then it does it, but it just warms your heart places. And these people are so real.
Yes.
And the things that they go through and their pasts coming into what their current situations and stuff are now, it just makes them so much more complex and beautiful and so much more able to hold on to. And like people can find themselves in these characters, and I think that's amazing. And I love that. And they each have such a different story, and it's so beautifully woven together by the end of it. And I was just like, oh, this
chef's kiss.
Chef's kiss. It's so great. So great. You did a great job. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that, but I'm going to tell you that anyway.
No, I do. I really
job. It's so good. It is so good.
And I think when we were scrolling through, because we, of course, we like to read other people's like reviews and what they think about it. We saw that quite a few people were comparing it to The Witcher. Do you think? How do you feel about that comparison?
Yeah, we were curious.
I'm really honored. I feel honored. Like, I mean, conceptually, it follows really similar strands to me. It's got that kind of the gruff hero and the adoption of the precocious child with kind of mysterious power. I mean, The Witcher is episodic in nature. I haven't actually read them. I know I should. I haven't played the game either. I did watch the series after my editor told me that I should. And I was like, oh, I'm really pulling on whenever anyone compares it even slightly to The Witcher, I just feel kind of like, wow, that's a really I feel really sort of honored to even be mentioned in the same sentence. So it's great for me.
So like I was saying before, we love your focus on characters. And I was wondering if you could explain like what your thought process was for the tension in the character dynamic, or like where you wanted to go with these people, essentially. If you could like explain a little bit more about that.
Oh, I could talk about this for hours. I will try my best not to. So, I mean, as you can probably imagine when you're reading the book, the title of the book, the first character and the first kind of core character whose story I wanted to tell was Bethann, who is the Godkiller. I wanted to write a really like strong, real, gruff, annoying, like belligerent woman. And I wanted her to be funny. I wanted her to be a bit like naughty. I wanted her to be sexy and just like everything loud and like spilling off the page. And I wanted her to be a really strong voice in the story. And I started writing from her point of view. I considered writing it in first person, played around a bit with that, and then continued in the vein of her voice, which is kind of the first one that you hear in the book. But as I started to sort of pull the story together, I realized that she is a very very black and white perspective on the world, where gods are real. She hates gods. She thinks they shouldn't exist. She thinks that she is the last line of defense against them. But that's just one way of seeing this world, and her way is not necessarily the right way. There is no right way. And so I really wanted to kind of have foils to her voice. And so I brought in Inara's voice, which is the young girl that she sort of semi-adopts and like looks after. And Inara is green to the world. She is experiencing it all for the first time, which kind of also is a bit of a foil for the reader who gets to kind of see some new things through her eyes. And she's also kind of fairly she doesn't have a lot of reasons to have built up bias about the world. She kind of is seeing it as it is. And that's a really kind of different perspective to Kitten's. And then we have Elo, who's the knight errant. And I thought, okay, we've got two like warriors who both have had their own experiences of trauma, of disabling events, of kind of terror in their past, and of gods. But they have very, very different perspectives on it. Elo thinks everyone should be free to worship as they wish, whereas Kitten thinks everyone should just have faith in themselves and nothing else. And then we have the god, and the god was the last voice I added because I kind of thought, you know, we've already got 3 points of view in a very, very small space. But I also thought that's such an interesting perspective to have. It's kind of like
Yes.
the complete opposite of Kitten, a god who the world is quite literally out to get him. Like the world wants him dead. God's abandoned in this country, like he shouldn't exist. He's been in hiding for years. And I love bringing out his voice as well, and his kind of, and because we were all experiencing the same thing, or at one point when all these characters come together, they're experiencing the same journey at the same time. Their different voices add a lot of different layers to the journey, like what they're paying attention to, what they see, how that reflects in their past. And I had to make sure that those voices were really dynamic and different. And so I wanted to be, whenever you picked up a single chapter, if you could read a few sentences, you don't need to know at the beginning of the chapter where it says who's speaking. You already kind of know whose chapter it is by how they speak, how they like what they look at and what they put as important around them. And that's kind of was really, really fun to play with, that kind of semi-immersed third person. So yeah, I really wanted to have people with different views of the world and of their journey, and then have them be kind of foils to each other. So like kind of innocence versus like experience, and love of gods and the world, and resentment or hatred of it. And like kind of those things aren't necessarily like, I'm very ambivalent about them. It's about those characters and what they choose to believe. And that's was really exciting to read. I just loved like playing with these characters, and like their voices are really very, very strong to me now.
I really enjoyed that when we started reading from Sketty's point of view. I loved that you added that because, like you said, because he's obviously not human. And so seeing the way that the gods would see all of their humanity and their desires and things like that, I loved it because it was such a stark contrast to everything else that everybody was feeling and participating in. And I loved that he was, I guess I would say flawed in a way, but maybe that's not the correct word, and he was vulnerable. And sometimes I think when people think of like gods and stuff like that, that they don't assume that there can be like humanity in that, or like that kind of a vulnerability. And I loved it so much because even in like his size and his growing, and like you could see physically and then feel him in his tone and everything, what was happening. And I loved that added such a depth to how they were going, because honestly, like these people probably wouldn't in any other situation be friends, even give each other the time of day. And this one goal brought them together and helped them to kind of like realize that, you know, people are all different. Everybody is going to have something to bring to the table, and that even though we don't share all the same things, we can still be friends. We can still work together. We can still have love for each other and appreciate each other. And he was a very crucial part of the whole dynamic. And I love that I felt every emotion for him as a god, because I was like, at one point I was like, he's so selfish. And he's so like, why would he do that to her? And I'm so mad at him. And like,
I loved him so much.
Very naughty boy. Sketty is a very naughty boy.
And then when you realize that everything that I was like relying on for my opinion of the gods from Kissen, I was taking what she was saying and like, yeah, this is how we've got to deal with this stuff. And like, you know, how dare he, and going on and on. And then realizing that when he could show things that no one thought, like emotion and compassion and love, when no one thought that he could. I was just like,
Yeah.
okay. Like that turns everything on its head, but that's what makes it so real and investing as a reader. And it makes you want to keep going because you just want everything to like come together. And it almost makes me worry what's going to happen in the next book, because I'm like, if anybody leaves us, I'm going to be devastated.
I loved like the character dynamic development between Kissin and then Sketty throughout like the entire book, because you start the book and Kissin's like, I absolutely like hate you, like no,
Can't do this.
and then he just kind of becomes like a little bit like annoying, like an annoyance, and then you can tell like she has like a soft spot for him.
Yes. Well, and she can see, I think she sees herself in Inara, right? I mean, she really holds on to that, because this poor girl has experienced great loss, and so she's like, I have to protect her at all costs, because this is what I have to give back. Like this, she can't have the hand that I was dealt, essentially, is what I felt like. And the fact that she can learn to trust him by the end, maybe trust loosely, but give him that little bit of extra rope to know, okay, like we can do this, we can figure this out. It's just so good. And I loved the character base of it. A lot of people really like, everything else that's going on, and it's got great plot and it's got all those things too, but I just love what you did with all of the different dynamic of that. It was fantastic. So good.
I think the character like interaction was like my favorite part of the book, and I loved when they were like on their like little journey.
Yes, sitting around the fire, experiencing like real life together, even going and having to realize, all right, we all stink, we need to go down to the river and we've got to figure this out, and like all of the undoing of that, and how it like brings everything naturally into light as far as the story goes, which I don't want to spoil anything because I want you guys to read it, but it's just beautiful. It really is.
I really wanted to kind of to have or work towards a plot that people could feel immersed in, and that there are moments in the text where you have, and one of the greatest hearts of the book, the thing that I really wanted to bring out of it is that sense of fellowship and found family, and that kind of how people can love each other even across divides, even across thought divides. And those moments of breaking bread around a fire for me are kind of like, I mean, that's for me also like the heart of fantasy is often the belly of fantasy. It's around kind of food, and it's around companionship, and it's around fellowship, and found family that is just the next level of fellowship, I believe. And that's something that kind of the queer community has like taught us, is that we can choose our family, we can build our family. And I love that sense in the book, or love bringing out those really quiet moments where the story has sort of a bit of a space to breathe. It's something I did intentionally, and I love it when people love that too.
Yes, so good. So you said that this was your debut novel earlier. Did you anticipate that this would really kind of blow up on such a grand scale and that people would really cling? How does that like feel like? I don't know, like I don't know what I would do with.
I looked at the cover and I was like, yep,
absolutely,
it's gonna go,
it's gonna just yeah. And the description too, though.
Yes.
I think I've been, so as I said, this is by far not my first book. It's actually the 7th book that I've written in full, and the 4th or 5th, I believe 4th. I just did a post about this, but on Instagram, I think it's the 4th book I had sent out with my agent, went to publishers, and the previous 3 had all been turned down. And I was keeping writing because I love it. As I said, for me, it's like breathing. And every time I kind of have written a book and everyone said no, I've been like, should I even keep trying? Like, what's the point?
Right.
And I always kept coming back to it because it's something that I just that I love and I want to be good at, even if it never saw ink and never got on paper. So when I sent this to my agent and it went to publishers, I was like, well, there's another one gone, and I'll work on something else now, because I didn't think it would sell. I was just thought I'll just send another one into the abyss and see if the abyss speaks back. So when it had the first buy-in, which was just in the UK, I was over the moon. Like I was completely I didn't really believe it for quite a few months. I
Yeah.
kept being like, nah, that was a dream. And then the whole kind of, the process of editing around like a full-time job was still going. And it is really hard work, and almost every writer has to work on their writing around their full-time work. Every creator does as well. So, and then it got published in the UK, and also was in a subscription box, which very much helped. But even just the organic pre-orders were huge, and I think absolutely based on the beauty of the cover, on the huge work of the team in the UK as well, and hopefully the story as well was helped.
Yes.
And the response has blown me out the water, and I still kind of get quite emotional when I think about it. So trying to think about it too much, but and so everything on top of that has just felt like such a bonus. So when the US decided they were going to pick it up, it was a couple of months after publication in the UK, I can still barely speak, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, more people get to read this, and I get to connect with more people, and like booksellers and librarians and readers who I've spoken to, so many have come to me with like such passion for this story, which I felt was just kind of like my thing for me, and it would always be that. And I'm so overjoyed that people have taken it and ran away with it and made it their own. So yeah, it feels strange and deeply suspicious, but people like the book, and that's really great.
That's a good way to say it.
I'm in a few book groups, just like on social media and stuff, and it's insanely popular. Like in the US right now, I mean, everybody's like, I want Godkiller. Like, does anybody have a copy of this? I want this. And
yes, and even like the ARCs and stuff like that. If you're like showing that at all, people are like, "Oh my,
give it to me!"
I'm like, okay. It's like
if anyone's like not watching the video, like I'm kind of combusting with embarrassment right now. But yeah, the fact that people read it, liking it, or talking about it, sharing it, is just every single person reads it. It just feels like kind of a bit of a connection to my heart, and so I just feel really, really privileged to have been able to put this book out there. Yeah, I never imagined, to be honest, that it would see ink at all. So I feel really blessed.
So are any of the characters that were written in the book representative of people in your life, or just kind of like societal concepts?
No, I think if I tried to do that, or tried to kind of impose concepts too strongly on characters, then they wouldn't have felt real or alive.
Right.
Yeah.
There were kind of aspects of the world and of the characters that I did a lot of research into and I wanted to bring out. For example, like Kissing has a physical disability, which wasn't my intention when first writing the character. But with her, at the very beginning of the book, she experiences is a sacrifice to a god. Sorry, spoiler, but it's just straight in the prologue.
Right.
And to get out of that, she needs to have something sacrificed, and the gods in this world, the Lord, is kind of offering praise is pretty good. Offering incense, candles, coins, ribbon is even better. Offering blood, flesh, bone is even better than that. And so it needed to be a big offering. So I did a lot of work with authenticity editors and with just reading about what the disabled community thinks about fantasy, what frustrates them about reading fantasy, and research into kind of like experiences of using prostheses, like kind of phantom pain, what that is like, to make sure that the character was respectful and authentic. So I definitely didn't kind of like pick sort of, oh, I'm just gonna push that concept in this character and that's what they represent.
Right.
It was, but I wanted to make sure they were whole, real, living, breathing, complicated, flawed, and excellent people. And so I really wanted to kind of bring out all these different aspects and make sure that they did feel whole and rounded, and they did make mistakes, and they were, they pissed each other off all the time, that kind of thing.
I really appreciate that part of Kissing. And I think that you can tell that you wrote them, like you just let it come out of you. You know what I mean? You can tell that they're unique to themselves. And I really appreciated that you added in all those things about her, because like you said, it makes her more real.
Yeah.
And it makes her more relatable. And it kind of like the concept of like being overpowered or OP or something like that. You know what I mean? It gives her that like that workaround that she has to go through, just like everybody else. Like, I'm fighting this fight with you, just like you, and we're doing this together, and we have to figure out these different things. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed that. And it made her more, not just invested, because I think that even if it didn't happen, she would still be invested considering what she went through as a person. But it showed like not just the sacrifice of her soul and herself, her personality, who she was, but a part of her really was every part of the imagination. Kissing was affected by what's happening in the world. And I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it.
Was she your favorite character to write, or?
Ooh, that's a bogus question.
Oh,
we love them all.
Yeah, that's like picking your favorite like pet kid,
Yeah.
whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I don't know. Like, Kissing was basically stamped off the page and refused to be anything other than what she is, and that was so delicious to write. I think kind of the harder characters to write was probably Elo and Sketty, because they're a little bit more internal, whereas Kissing is like, she wears a heart on her sleeve and she is who she is and she loves who she is, whereas Elo is very traumatized and is very contained. He's very knightly, he's very kind of straight-laced, and so I loved kind of seeing the cracks in his armor. I think I really, really loved writing Elo, because I find him to be very interesting and complex and so rigid at the beginning that as he starts opening up, you start kind of like seeing more of who you could be. And I really enjoyed kind of peeling back those aspects of that character. So I definitely don't have a favorite character, but I think kind of that was both challenging and rewarding to write the Baker Knight on a quest.
Yes.
Such a good like dichotomy, like a I don't know, because even Kissing was just like, you're a baker. I was like, yeah, he is. I loved it. Okay, so for the other writers out there who listen, and for we have a teen writers group here that our YA librarian Brittany does every week, and there's a whole slew of kids that come in and write and share their stories and stuff like that. How long, or the process from maybe not start to finish for Godkiller, how long did it take to be able to get all this together and then get it out for people to be able to enjoy?
For this particular book, it took probably the longest to write, but that was because I began it before COVID, and then during COVID I was working on Scotland's digital COVID response, and so that was kind of like the majority of my waking hours. So time to write fell a bit by the side. So I would say taking out that time and the actual time which I had pen to paper, it took around 4 or 5 months to have the first draft, and then a little bit longer to edit it and rewrite it and re-edit it, and then ask friends or ask beta readers to look at it as well. I took a kind of a lot of care with this with the first draft. That would be like the 5th draft by the time it went to my agent. From the point of and then I did another revise with my agent, so that was another couple of months. So I'd say 7 months by this point. I went on submission to publishers. Now that can take, depending on what's going on in the publishing industry and what they're doing, that can take anything between a couple of weeks to several months for an offer to come through. As we kind of mentioned earlier, I only had one offer, and it did come through after a few weeks from the UK, which was really surprising to me because I wasn't expected to hear anything for about 6. And from the point of offer, it took about 1.5 years to get to publication. So through that time is editing and then writing and then kind of sending away, and then getting up print schedules, like kind of the publisher trying to drum up sales and publicity and interest. And so it goes through kind of a structured process to it before it actually gets to be on a shelf. So most books take around 2 years from beginning to publication, I would say.
It's not as long as I thought for some reason.
Yeah.
So then,
I know it would take
It does
me
vary from
a billion years. I'd be
This
writing
is
a
not
book
the
for
rule.
10
There
years.
is no rule with writing. Like, I mean, some that take longer, some will take shorter.
Right.
that's so then the next book to this, the sequel to this, because it's going to be a trilogy, correct?
It is, yes.
Okay. Which is so exciting because I thought it was going to be a duology, and then when I realized it was going to be a trilogy, I was like, yes, okay. So it's coming out really soon, isn't it?
Yes, so in the US, it's coming out in March. In the UK, it will be in February.
Okay, all right.
So
I'm
what
gonna
the US did, the publisher did in North America, was they took, because it had been published in January in 2023, and they managed to turn around publishing it, releasing it, getting ARCS out, getting it distributed in an incredibly short time scale for the US. I do think the US has longer lead time on publication. They usually need a book to be completely finalized and absolutely ready 6 months prior to it being actually printed. Because there's those long print schedules, there's a huge amount of books to go. So it is a testament to the publishing team to have turned and got Godkiller out within such a short time frame. And then they're trying to catch up with the UK publication dates. So this time the UK moved forward by a month, and the US got it to March. So they're literally within a month, it's going to be both published for book 2, and then book 3, we're hoping to release it on exactly the same date in the US and the UK, which would be really exciting because it'll be like,
it'll be the whole thing coming together at once. So then this is me being nosy, and you don't have to answer this question. So is the third book completed?
No, the third book is I'm about a third into it.
Okay.
That's really cool though.
I'm gonna,
People don't have to wait like a billion years for the second one.
I know, but I'm gonna fly through, and it's gonna feel like
you have to pace yourself.
I'm gonna get this, and I'm gonna go right through it. I'm
10 pages a day.
Like just like, okay, 1 page. You can read 1 paragraph until we get to this point, because I'm gonna be chomping out the bit. Oh, it's gonna be so good. And so I already know you're gonna devastate me, but it's okay. Because we love you.
I love you too.
It's gonna be fantastic. Oh, I'm very excited. Okay, my tangent.
Are there other projects that you're working on kind of like in between or currently?
No, but I will be soon.
Okay.
But at the moment, I'm purely focusing on completing the trilogy,
Right.
because I really want to, and to like finish the story, and then the next projects are starting to percolate. So I believe I'll probably be tag teaming the editing of book 3 and the writing of my new book that will hopefully follow.
I'm excited.
Spoilers.
Spoilers.
So then would you say that fantasy is your favorite genre, or do you have a favorite genre, authors and things like that?
I think fantasy will always be my go-to. I think fantasy is kind of like one of the purest hearts of storytelling. It's kind of the myths we tell around the campfire. It's folk tales, and it's old wives' tales, and it's superstitions. Fantasy is kind of like everything that we have done to entertain each other throughout millennia. But I love so many different things. Like I'm reading, I really like sort of social history and kind of like particularly kind of like Mediterranean trade history, or Mediterranean and Arabic trade history is just absolutely fascinating. I really love sci-fi, so I will always go for a sci-fi book. And yeah, pretty much I'll read anything I can get my hands on. But at the moment, I've been having the enormous privilege of getting fantasy ARCs. So people are sending me fantasy books to read, or
Nice.
sometimes like historical fiction, which is also brilliant. So that's been really lovely, is to be able to like access new books coming up just a little bit earlier.
Yes, it's so fun. It's just like such an amazing treat. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
ARC mail is the best mail.
It is the
It's
best
like Christmas.
mail. Yes, it is. And it's so fun to be able to dive into a story. And then I think the only thing about it though is that once you're finished with it and like nobody else has really got it yet, and then you're finished and you're like bubbling to try to talk to people about it, and you're just like,
Yeah.
but I can't spoil it for you, but you kind of have to wait for it to come out until this time. So it's like, it's got two sides of that coin. Like,
True.
I
I
mean,
mean,
game.
Yeah.
yeah, I always have to try and seek out someone who's either read it or written it. So occasionally I'll message an author and be like, just absolutely scream at them about their book. And then they run away real fast.
We've definitely done that before.
Like, what's happening? Give us more.
It's like, how dare you? Please do it.
What are you doing? Yes. Oh, so good. This
Yeah.
was great.
I
Love
loved
it.
it.
It was good. It was better than good, honest. It was fantastic. I'm going to show it again just because you guys need to see it again. It is amazing. And we want to thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today and being able to share this story and speak with us. I mean,
Yeah.
we're just two girls sitting in the library, book
Little
talking
old
with people.
Indiana.
Yeah, in the old Indiana, Kokomo, and being able to have the opportunity and the privilege to be able to sit down with you and talk about, something that comes from your heart and that really touched our hearts as well is phenomenal. And for you to be able to take that time out of your day to be able to sit with us and, kind of essentially come here, in a way, because technology is amazing. Right.
Thank you so much for having me, and inviting me, genuinely, when a library kind of messages saying, would you like to? I'm like, yes, immediate, because it's just wonderful. You do such good work, and being able to chat to you about books is just a dream come true.
It's the best part of the job.
Yeah.
Is being able to recommend, and when somebody comes up and is like, hey, do you know anything about this genre? And then you can pull from all these different people to be able to recommend stuff, because we all love different things.
Yeah.
And so thank you for giving us a tool in our tool belt to be able to give people, this, and I have been telling people, if you want to try to get into fantasy and you're not sure, this is such a good way to hop in and be totally drowned and in love, because it packs such a punch and you're going to be so invested and you're just going to kind of gobble it up. So thank you. We really appreciate you and your time and for writing this amazing book. And we're very much looking forward to picking up Sunbringer, which is coming out very, very soon.
Yeah.
So very excited.
Coming out in March.
I know. It's going to be, I got to get my hands on it. So we want to, again, say thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and being a part of this with us. It was very much a privilege. So thank you.